I left a cliffhanger at the end of the last episode, just saying I will tell you all about Lee Marshall and his rap connection.
Right, okay.
Lee Marshall's one of the commentators. He's on here, and they introduce him just for this match. They call him Stagger Lee Marshall, although the Stagger Lee is very much a blues sort of character who was a murderer. I don't quite know. It doesn't equate with Lee Marshall, who's this quite middle-aged, quite overweight guy with a dyed moustache. But Marshall was an announcer in wrestling from the 80s. He was one of the commentators on WrestleMania 2. He'd actually taken the LA portion of that show. Right. And he worked for a number of years in the AWA. Later, he would do Thunder. He would be a co-host of that for WCW, which was one of their B shows. He'd do that with Bobby Heenan and Tony Schiavone. And I don't quite know why they bring him in to do a women's match. There's no particular reason other than the AWA was one of the few promotions that still did the occasional women's match over the years. Yeah. But more excitingly, from 1999 until 2014, Lee Marshall was the voice of Tony the Tiger, Frosty's mascot.
Good.
He died in 2014. At his obituary, one of his radio colleagues said, "What a set of pipes. Sitting next to him, even a whisper became a roar."
Unhelpful. You don't want that.
Voiceover artists who cannot control what they're doing is no good.
Don't need a mic. Don't need a home studio.
Because this is Monday Nitro, the hottest thing going, June 15th, Union Day along Island, New York. We sure hope to see you there. Now, fans, there was a song maybe 20 years ago by Archie Bell and the Drells. The song was called Tighten Up, and one of the lines was, "I dance just as good as I walk." Well, I'd like to think that this man could dance as good as he wrestles, because if that were the case, he'd be a great dancer. Can we talk about your wrestling, Alex Wright? Can we talk about the time when you were the crew...
Lee.
Yes?
Why are you sweating so hard?
Well, it's hot in here.
I think you're a little bit high. Did you listen to yourself what you just said?
You turned the showers on. There's hot water all over the place.
What showers? I don't see any showers running. Oh, my God.
The best thing he did was, for a number of years, he was involved in the Los Angeles rap station K-Day, which billed itself as the world's most dangerous radio station. I think BBC Radio 1 in the 70s can lay claim to that title. But he had a character that he did, which was called King News. So he used to sort of introduce it, going, "I'm King News, and I come to you this morning with the truth." And what King News was an attempt to reach gangbangers and disaffected black youth in LA. And because he had such a deep voice and a deep timbre, and because he was called King News, it was widely assumed by most people listening that Lee Marshall was and this is a quote, a black prophet.
Right, okay.
And so it was a surprise when he turned out to be like a white, fat radio DJ in his 40s.
I had that with Rick Dees and the Weekly Top 40 that used to be on TFM in the 80s. I thought this guy, he just sounded like he had such a kind of beautiful, rich voice, and he's just a skinny white guy. And I was like, whoa, it was absolutely destroyed my memory of him.
It was sort of more acceptable back then because I don't think people found it offensive. You could not do it now. And they basically they played up to the fact that he was talking to black youth from a position of experience of the gangbanging world.
Right.
Not strictly true, but he delivered his 3 times a day bulletins on K-Day, 4-minute newscasts, which he put in a lot of outspoken personal commentary in. So he would make observations directed directly to the black teenagers who made up the station's core audience. Right. But he would always talk about street crime and gang members. So he would talk about how gangbang BS was behind a shooting during a graduation party in which a young guy had been killed. And at the end, he sort of added, "Oh yeah, you gangbangers sure know how to party." You know, really weird. So, "Hey, you know what happens when you go to jail? They got the honeymoon suite reserved for you, and they're going to elect you prom queen." A really odd thing to do. He later said, he was able to relate so well to young black men who were skirting around the edges of crime.
Oh, God.
Because I came from the streets.
I just can't help but think this is going to be a sentence that's going to haunt me. Because I came from the streets.
Yeah, no, this is good. "I split my time between LA and Brooklyn when I was growing up, and I had some affiliation with a group of youths when I was younger, although we did not go around committing crimes. It was mostly territorial sorts of things, kind of West Side Story stuff."
It was Top Cat. You were a member of Top Cat's posse. And the crime that you got up to was putting a coin in a call box and then pulling it out on a string.
Fishing it out
with a bit of string.
Oh, look, I think things are getting a bit tense here. A lot of guns have come out. Let me sing you a song about... I don't think hardcore gang members are listening during the times he's on, said the assistant director of the Community Youth Sports and Arts Foundation. Their working hours are nighttime.
Yeah.
But what this did was King Truth became so big that he was featured on a anti-violence rap, which was done by the West Coast Rap All-Stars. It was called We're All in the Same Gang, and it was the #1 rap single in the country on Billboard. The people who are in that song are Tone Loc, Ice-T, Dr. Dre, Young MC, Digital Underground, MC Hammer, and Eazy-E. And it's opened by Lee Marshall. Lee Marshall, the AWA commentator, pretending to be a black prophet, talking about how everyone should come together. And it's just a weird thing of the lives that people lead.
I'm King News, and I come to you with the truth. The mean streets took 6 more lives overnight, all the result of gangbang stupidity. By the way, you gangsters should know, one of your victims was a 3-year-old girl. Local gang members, you still don't get it, do you?
One of the things about him coming in for this women's match is he did do a lot of work for Women of Wrestling, WOW, but that came years after this, about 3 years later. So it wasn't related to why they brought him in. But just a complex and confusing man. What are you into? I'm into patronising gangbangers and women's wrestling. Arrest him. Arrest
Put
him.
in prison. Well, I'd like that. I'm all in the gang. I would fit in quite well in prison, actually.
Yes. Like women, I have a lot in common with women wrestlers in that I like to see them.
All right, fans, we welcome you back. We were scheduled to go to the ring, but we cannot go to the ring right now because during the commercial break, I was just handed this release. This is just in from the WCW. Make sure you catch that football next time.
Wow.
WCW.
The Steiners versus Konnan and Hugh Morris with Jimmy Hart. I mean, I'm frightened by the Steiners. I'm frightened by how bad they are in this period as well. They were, so good in the early 90s and really by the mid-90s. It's sort of difficult to think they actually had another good match. They're just strong, but they always sort of radiate the feeling that they don't want to be there.
Well, they're kind of like direction of travel in every match I think I've seen them is it starts really strong and they're really brutal and they're really impressive, but actually finishing a match, it just all goes to shit. They never know where they're supposed to be. The matches always just fall to pieces. It's really strange.
They really do. And also, I mean, this thing of having a sort of thrown together tag team. They are 2 members of the Dungeon of Doom, although Konnan should never have been put in the Dungeon of Doom, which is dying at this point, by the way. Jimmy Hart will end up sort of losing Konnan by the end of this match. It's all just sort of falling down. And Konnan was, out of all 4 of them, he is the one who goes on in the next couple of years to actually, have a role in the sort of main events of wrestling. Scott Steiner will reinvent himself and he'll do, perfectly well. Rick Steiner will always be around. But Konnan, in retrospect, seems like a much more important character than I think he was given credit for at the time.
Yeah.
He looks also like he's ready for the Attitude Era. He is a modern 90s Mexican sort of gangster, neighborhood gangster look. And I think he fits in really well with where everything is going here. And more importantly, he was a guy who'd had a troubled sort of past. He was done for credit card theft and vehicle nicking and drugs and things when he was a teenager. He joined the army and then he started wrestling in Mexico. You would think Konnan is Mexican. He isn't Mexican. He was born in Cuba. His mum was Cuban. His dad was a Jewish Puerto Rican private investigator from New York.
I like it.
I mean, I would commission that series in a heartbeat.
I
a
love
Jewish
that.
Puerto Rican private investigator from New York moves to Cuba, right? And then gives birth to Konnan.
Following a massive cigar import-export business or something.
Just
Wow.
a long cigar that goes from Cuba to New York. And he is pulling himself along by his lips to get to the end of it. Wonderful. He has been in WCW earlier. He was in the Starrcade 1990 tag team competition, in which he actually met with the Steiners, but you wouldn't have ever pegged him as a star. In 92, he goes to the WWF, where he is given the gimmick of Max Moon, but he drops that really, really early on and just goes back to Mexico because he's fed up of lugging this spacesuit around. It times it with a moment where TV wrestling was finally unbanned in Mexico City after 30 years, and that just exploded in popularity. And he was a main eventer throughout that period. I believe he still holds the record for 48,000 fans in Mexico City, where he had a match at Triple Mania in 1993. Against Cien Caras, and I believe that is a record that is still unbeaten to today in Mexico. But where he is really, really important is sort of behind the scenes. So he comes back to WCW in 96, defends his Mexican heavyweight belt. They didn't really have many ideas for him, but he quickly moves up the card, he wins the US title, and then he joins the Dungeon of Doom. Kevin Sullivan, who ran the Dungeon of Doom, just said he didn't fit into it. He was forced into doing it. He said he's a fabulous performer, had a great mind for the wrestling business. He should have been on his own. Putting him with us, he just lost all the steam he had. But really importantly, at this time, Konnan is responsible for bringing in a lot of the prominent Mexican wrestlers who were working in WCW at this time. So he brings in Rey Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, and La Parka. So his historical importance, really, we can only recognise, now his career is over. He is still a big booker. He still works for a lot of different promotions. He's still around. And he did the Hall of Fame induction for Rey Mysterio at WrestleMania. And he did a brilliant speech putting over Rey Mysterio, not himself. And I think everyone began sort of going, you know what, he's been around for so long, and he was in TNA and AAA when it was bad, and he's always got his sort of finger in a lot of pies, and he's always backstage. There is something about it that, again, we took him for granted. And you sort of look back over his career and go, just exciting times that you probably won't see again just because of the way the industry's changed. He's teamed with Hugh Morris. I remember the bit at the end where Konnan turns on Hugh Morris and he makes the decision to do a tiny little drop kick to Hugh Morris's knee to sort of knock him over. And Hugh Morris just stands up and it looks like Konnan's really whiffed it. And I was disappointed for him there. He does the DDT to recover and then off he fucks and he's just like, I don't need this. I don't need it. And within days, he will be part of the NWO as anyone who was remotely good immediately
just get
sort
put
of slotted in. The next bit of the show, out comes Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth. Randy's got a mic. That is not always good news for a show going to
long,
time,
going long.
being easy to follow. I did notice as he came out here, it was a moment where I suddenly thought, we lost a lot when Randy Savage went into black and white clothing. We lost that sort of naturally neon sort of element that made him such a superstar. And it's a shame that he spent so many of the last years of his career dressing down when, he was just such a good puffed up peacock. And he begins talking about the NWO. It's really clear, Pete, since we last saw WCW, the NWO has rapidly got too big. He begins listing everyone. He says the Outsiders and Six, who are the Wolfpack, which is a fraction part of it. Hogan, Savage, Buff Bagwell, Scott Norton and Eric Bischoff are the other NWO. And thankfully, DDP comes down with a crutch. Savage runs out. And the NWO then appear at the back, and Virgil is there as well. Savage has forgotten Virgil in the list of the people who are now in the NWO. Virgil is now called Vincent, but you can hear Savage very clearly just begins going, you've got to move aside, Virgil, like that. So Savage doesn't care about copyright. That role that the Virgil took of the sort of enforcer who was not really a hard man but was a former WWF star, so aligned with the NWO. The Godfather recently did an interview where he said he was actually offered that role.
Right.
So it was prior to him being the Godfather when he was just Kama Mustafa. He was in the Nation of Domination at that point. But he said that WCW went with Virgil as he was a lot cheaper, which is cruel. DDP comes in, he just hits everyone with the crutches as the NWO try and storm him. The numbers are too big and Scott Norton sort of knocks him over and they begin beating him down. And Savage is so good at the slide into the ring and start hitting someone in the head really, really quickly. Really good. The dash in and batter. Savage is magic at. And out comes the Giant to save him. Look, it did its job. It was pretty quick. It was pretty hot. That's always a bonus. So I was ready for that to drag on and on and on. But the one thing this show doesn't do is hang around.
No, it really didn't.
And what it really does is you go, crikey, I mean, what a time to be the booker of WCW, where you can have all of those people and they don't even appear on this card.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems absolutely ridiculous that they did.
Honestly, Eric Bischoff, like, speaking of booking WCW, like, that level of handsome is a purely American thing, isn't it? He's so fucking effortlessly good looking. I just don't know how you have that configuration of features and just walk around with it and excel with it.
But I think that was a lot of his success did come from the fact that he would go into corporate buildings and they would just go, he looks handsome. He must be good at this. And here we are.
Yeah.